Hello, I'm Curtis Burton, and this is Phoenix Restoration's shop, and this is our latest project, a 1969 Shelby GT500 convertible. In the 1960s, you'd gone through a period where horsepower was continually going up, torque was continually going up, and this car was not only the pinnacle of those performance numbers for Ford, but it was also the pinnacle of Shelby production in terms of a luxury performance car. This car was bought by a gentleman by the name of Peck in Florida, and he was a pilot. He bought it, in fact, he was a World War II Corsair pilot and then ultimately a Pan Am pilot, and this was his airport car. I got all of the original paperwork, all the maintenance records, all the things that Mr. Peck had really cherished about this car over the years. And he should have cherished it because it's one of only 7 that came in this color. It's the only one. That means it's a one of one that came with the options that this car has on it. So let's talk a little bit about this car and why we're going to be doing a restoration on it. First of all, if you're an average person on the street, this car looks pretty darn good. In fact, you might say, why would you even restore this car? Well, in the business, this car would be seen as probably a high number 2 or a high number 3 or a low number 2. Why do I say that? Well, when Mr. Peck had the car, he decided at some point to repaint it, and the paint work that was done on it wasn't all that high quality. In fact, they didn't disassemble the car, which is an absolute must-do if you're going to get a premium quality paint job. So what you see as you go around the car are imperfections in the paint, places where there are seams on the car where it wasn't taken apart, paint started to flick off, and you have deteriorating paint. You also have some discoloration on the hood of the car, and so for all those reasons, you really want to take this car completely apart to get maximum value out of it and repaint the car. And I've done all the mechanical things to the car already. The engine's already been overhauled, the transmission's been overhauled, the brakes, the rear end, all of those things now as we disassemble this car to take it from a number 2 to a number 1 are things that we only have to go back now in detail, because since this car is only driven lightly, the engine has less than about 1,000 miles on it at this point, and so there's no reason to go in and open that up. You just want to go in and re-detail the engine, freshen everything up. But the main thing we'll be doing will be to repaint the car, put all the paint markings back on it to factory standards from when it came from the factory, freshen up the interior anywhere we have things that we need to do there, freshen up the convertible roof, and basically just go through and freshen the whole car up. My expectation is it's going to take us about a month to disassemble this car, paint it, get everything into the condition that we want it and back together so that we can drive it, enjoy it, or sell it. So we're coming up on about 1 o'clock on the first day of real work on the car. We've clearly made a lot of progress. We stripped the interior out of the car, at least as far as we're going to go. The other things that we've done, we've removed the door tags, which are the Shelby unique tags, getting ready to take the window glass out, and we've pulled the engine out of the car. Now remember, we've only been at this since about 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, and it's about noon today. We knocked off fairly early last night, about 10 o'clock. So lapse time actually working just on this car has been probably around 8 to 10 hours of total time. Today we pulled the rear end and the spring assemblies. Springs are actually the original springs, have the original Shelby numbers on them that are unique to Shelby. Although it doesn't look like much has changed in some ways. We have the exhaust completely out of the car. We have the transmission out of the car. We have the motor out of the car. And we have the doors off. We have the cowling cover off. We've got a stockpile of things as they've come out of the car. All of these will have to be freshened up. But what we've also done is we've kept with all of the various parts. As you take things apart, what you make a real effort to do, if you look at these places where the trunk lid mounts, you see those bolts that the trunk lid came out of there with are still there. So what we've done is, in some instances, we've left bolts in place. In other instances, like when we pull chrome off, we've bagged or taped the bolts that held that chrome in place to the piece. And we've also got bags of seat belts, and everything has its material that went to hold it in place. And what's underneath the car has a purple color sprayed all underneath it. That's a very rare thing in terms of what I've always read and been led to believe. In fact, it's not just rare, I've never seen any reference to a purple color. And in fact, underneath this car, there is no evidence of ever having had any red oxide primer under it. Because of that, what we've done is we've stopped to visit with the registry guys a little bit and see what they have to say about what we're seeing here. So we're on day 10 of the restoration of the 69 Shelby GT500 convertible. And on day 3, which we went through, we did an inventory of all the parts that we were going to need to finish the car and got those on order. And significantly, we double-checked that there weren't any parts that we were going to need in this quick rebuild that were going to be on back order. We made sure that everything was available and that it could be shipped to us fairly quickly. So we did that on day 3. Day 10, we've received all the parts. We know that we've got all the things that we need to finish the car. Yesterday, we dispatched the hood, the doors, all of the parts that are missing from the car right now, the tail, the trunk lid, the rear quarter fillets. All that went down to the paint shop, and they started working on that while we finished up some of the things that we were doing to reassemble the car. We went in, sanded underneath the car, cleaned everything up, resprayed underneath the car, put it back to factory original condition, cleaned all the lines. We took the rear end out from under the car, confirmed all the numbers and markings on the rear end were correct and original to the car. Then we repainted and detailed all of the rear end parts, the rear springs, and detailed those, bolted those back in. So the engine has been detailed, it's been repainted, put back in. We've repainted the engine bay already, and when this goes down to the paint shop, they'll mask off all the areas that are open, like in the cockpit area and under the hood and in the trunk. They'll mask all of that off, they'll sand down, they'll remove the stripes, and then they'll shoot the paint on the car. You want to keep anything that you can that's original, that's in good condition, in that condition. So when we took the carpet out, for instance, one of the things that we found was the holy grail of restorers. This is the actual build sheet for the car that was used in the factory, and what it does, it looks like it's a dark blank sheet of paper, but in reality, if you hold it up to the light, you can see all of the codes and the paint instructions, as well as DSO, which was where it was ordered from. All of that material is on this build sheet, and typically what happened was when they were building the car in the factory, when they got to a certain point, they would toss this on the floorboard, put the carpet in, and that would go down the assembly line as one of about 5 of these that would typically be on the car. Almost always by this point, some 50 years later, all of these have disappeared. Some of the humorous stuff you find when you're doing one of these things is the kind of, okay, it's Friday afternoon and I really have to get to the bar. This one has one of those. There are 2 little sound deadening patches that went under the driver and passenger seats, and they have a stamped position in the floorboard for them. One of them is right where it's supposed to be. The other one fell on the floor and it covered the bolt hole for where the seat went in. And basically, it's Friday afternoon, it's time to go home, put the carpet in, cover it up, drill the bolt hole, and so 50 years later, it's kind of half done, but we're going to leave it right where it was. So, where are we? From here, as I said, we go down to the paint shop. In about a week, we'll have this car back. Everything will be painted, and we'll start the reassembly on this very rare Shelby. Here we are. It's Monday. We have gotten the car back from the painter. Doors will be in tomorrow. They were going to be here today, but they had some touch-up they had to do. As you can see, the car looks still like it has a lot to do to it, but it's got nice shiny new paint all over it, and it's ready to go back into being assembled. We just want to talk a little bit about March the 5th to today's April the 5th, so exactly 30 days later. The car's actually been pretty much in the shape you see it now in this photo for about the last 5 days. So what did we do in that 30 days? Well, as you saw in some of the earlier video, we pulled the drivetrain out of the car, pulled the interior out of the car. We repainted the car, took the car completely apart, repainted it, put the car back together, and then as we were putting it back together, we detailed each and every piece that went into it. Lots of new nuts and bolts, lots of new soft items, things like weather strip, a new vinyl convertible top, new in lots of places. So let's just walk around and talk about that for a little bit. You saw where the engine bay looked pretty nice when we first came in, but if you look at the engine bay now, it's all been freshened up. The motor's been repainted, transmission's been repainted, all the detail factory paint markings have been put in, the inside of the engine bay has been painted, all of the underside of the hood's been painted, all of the little detail items have been polished and buffed, things like the chrome. We sent the chrome eyebrows on the front of the car out to be buffed and cleaned. We sent the bumpers out to be buffed and cleaned the wheels, repainted the rear end, detailed the rear end. And when we talk about detail, let's talk a little bit about what that means. There are a lot of factory-specific paint marks. For instance, on a Shelby from this period, the rear end would always be painted a semi-gloss black, and then there would be various factory paint markings with codes on there, paint splotches in different places and different colors. Detail the transmission by painting it the right colors. These cars had a cast iron tail shaft on them and an R-code servo, which is unique to R-code Shelbys and Mustangs. So we detailed all of that. It has all of the factory markings underneath. It is detailed inside so that it has things like the little things on the sun visors to tell you how to start the car. All of the seat belts have been redone so that they have the proper tags and codes on them. Underneath the hood, the hoses that are in the engine bay have the right date codes. The belts have the right date codes and the right markings. So we've gone through an enormous amount of detail. So what you have today, 30 days later, is essentially a car that looks the way it looked when it left the factory back in 1969. If this car in its unrestored number 2 status had gone into an auction environment, it would probably have done fairly well. But the month that we spent and the $30,000 that we spent had a significant effect, because when the car actually did cross the block at the MECUM Houston auction, it set a world record for non-Shelby owned Shelby cars at auction. It went for $275,000, including the buyer premium, which just underlines the fact that if you take one of these cars to a restoration shop that is familiar with what needs to be done to them to get them back to factory original condition, there is a very good market for number 1 quality cars out there in the marketplace. in 2017.